Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Morrison Report podcast. And today we have with us Kerstin Stiebel from Engel Völkers, Cayman Real Estate Dreams. Kerstin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Stiebel, for having me on.
Sounds good. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you become an agent in the Caymans?
Thanks, Stiebel. Yeah. So very interesting question about how I ended up in Cayman as a real estate agent. Being a real estate agent is actually my second career. My first career was in corporate sales and marketing for over a decade in the Toronto area. But I'd always been passionate about real estate. And the idea of working with the end user was really important to me. I wasn't very passionate about the things I was selling necessarily in the corporate world, and I wasn't selling to the end user. And so between my passion for real estate and sales and marketing, the transition to real estate was quite easy. And I had quite a few successful years in the Toronto market. And just through some contacts I'd made and networking, I was introduced to a brokerage here in Cayman. And that brought me down here back at the end of 2017. And I've been in Cayman real estate since then. And I'm still back and forth a bit between Toronto and Cayman, but for the most part, I'm permanently living in the Cayman Islands.
Awesome. Sounds great. How's the weather today?
The weather is hot. We have, it's funny, they just put out the forecast for the summer saying we're going to have a hotter than normal summer. And they're showing the last 4 months average. And we've been breaking record temperatures for heat. And I mean, this is Cayman, so it's the Caribbean. It's already hot. It's been just super hot. In February, we had zero rain. There was 0 millimeters or inches of precipitation for the whole month of February. So we're also going through a huge drought here. So hot and dry. Wow. But hey, I'll take that any day over snow, dreary, gray weather.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because this winter in Toronto, we experienced the least amount of sun that we have experienced in a time. So, yeah.
I remember a year ago when I went home for Christmas, I was home for when I say home, I mean Toronto, to visit my parents. And I remember, I think I was home for like 20 days and I didn't see the sun for those 20 days. And I thought, oh my gosh, I could not come back to this full time. No, now Canada's a wonderful country and I am still proudly Canadian though.
Awesome. So talk to us a little bit about the market there. What is it doing right now? What is the market like for purchasing and selling, as well as what's the rental market like?
Yes, Cayman's a really interesting market. Although we're in the Caribbean and not everyone really knows what Cayman is or how it plays in the real estate market, it's actually very similar to the North American market. So our trends really follow those of kind of the big North American cities, maybe 3 to 6 months behind, but, similar to either the larger cities in the Western US or the Northeastern US and, say Ontario, Quebec, and BC, we follow similar trends. And that being said, we were very much in, and still a little bit in certain areas, in a seller's market, and we're probably now in a bit more of a balanced market. Volumes down, average price is still up, really in all areas, and we're continuing to see that trend now year over year, not just month over month. So that would be the general trend of the real estate market here.
And have you guys been affected by the high interest rates?
Definitely. So we have seen the same kind of hesitation amongst both investors, people who live in Cayman, expats, Caymanians, and, are interest rates going to go up more? Are they going to go down? Especially when they were consistently going up for over a year. It did put a lot of people on hold. But I think similar to, what we see in the Toronto market is, you can only hold off for so long. You just have to kind of do the math, check what your new affordability is. And the reality is it's all based on supply and demand. Interest rates go down a quarter. Prices are going to go up 5 to 10%. So, it's almost a wiser decision to invest now than to be playing with like a marginal difference in interest rates, which I'm sure is the same story you probably say to your clients all the time too.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about what the rental market is like there in terms of what's the rental demand for like Airbnbs? Are people still coming to the island to visit? What's that market like?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, the rental market is very expensive here. So it's got a very high demand with very low inventory. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Cayman's a bit different than the rest of the Caribbean, where we don't have the same sort of seasonality as, for those that don't know, we're one of the big global financial centers. So that's one of the greatest contributors to our GDP, not to mention real estate and construction and then tourism. So we have a less seasonal transient kind of population and more just like annually, like whatever time of the year it is, there's newer or different demand on the real estate rental market. So I always say for the rent that I'm currently paying, I could probably be paying a $2 million mortgage in Toronto. So, I mean, it's definitely, there's not a lot of inventory and there's a lot of demand. So that being said, depending on where you live, I always say it's very similar to Toronto or any big city. If you're living in the high demand areas, which in Cayman is 7 Mile Beach, Georgetown, Camana Bay, in that area, you're seeing the highest price points in both like property price as well as rental rates. And then as you kind of like move east and west of the center kind of core, the rates start to go down and purchase prices go down as well. But that being said, it's all, it doesn't really change in terms of what average rent is for that area or average price and what you're seeing as appreciation year over year. But it's definitely the less close you are to the center, the less expensive it is.
Interesting. So then if I'm an investor, is it a good time? I mean, I know that you said sort of what's going on with the market, but because the rental rates are so high, is it good? I'm assuming it's pretty good for investors to be in that market then?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I mean, I deal a lot with like investors from Canada and the US, as well as those people who live here and want to purchase investment properties. Right now, we have huge demand, and we're seeing it increasing weekly due to the fact that I'm not sure if you know, but Cayman is a tax neutral country. So
I'm just about to come to that question. Talk about the tax haven status.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, is right now a good time to buy? Yes, for so many reasons. Again, going back to supply and demand, we're a country of, I think our current population is about 84,000, give or take. And I mean, we're looking at two countries north of us, the US and Canada, that have combined 400 million people that are experiencing a lot of increased taxes. It seems by the day or week, I seem to read about new tax increases. So with Cayman being, and we don't call it a tax haven, it's the tax neutral country. So, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, many people have heard of Cayman being the place, and it's always good to call the elephant out in the room. Cayman was known for being a place where you could hide money and, money laundering, all that sort of thing. It is no longer known for that. It's been taken off every list due to the very, very strict rules that are now in place and regulations to ensure there's no money laundering and that all accounts are legit and there's no numbered accounts with no way to track them anymore. So that being said, we're tax neutral. And that means there are no taxes. So essentially, you're paying no income tax, no property tax, no inheritance tax, no capital gains tax. No sales tax, no carbon tax. No, like, I mean, I could go on and on. There are no taxes here.
It's so funny because you pretty much hit the nail on the head of all the taxes that people are concerned about here in Canada. So that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like being Canadian still, I mean, it's just like every day I'll be on like Facebook or the news or whatever. And I mean, the last I heard is that they've now added a carbon tax to restaurant bills. I mean, so I was just like, wow, like when does it just end? So, I mean, what happens is that we kind of call it a consumption tax. So obviously we have to collect money for the country in some way, but instead of it being through taxes, it will be rolled up into the cost of all goods. So like there is a stamp duty essentially on everything that you purchase. And in that is the cost of like the shipping, the duty for it and everything else. So it's rolled up into one price point. But you get to choose what you buy, right? Rather than just it going to everything. So we call it consumption tax, but there is no tax here essentially. And no talk of there being any taxes coming soon. So how this works into real estate is we do have a one-time stamp duty tax, which would be very similar to the land transfer tax in Toronto. And it's a one-time 7.5% on the purchase price of a property. And then that's it. So after that, you don't have your annual property tax. You don't have to pay a capital gains or income tax on any like investment property. And you're not, so if you sell it, you're not paying any taxes on that either. You're not paying taxes on commission for agents. There's, again, no taxes. So that does help with like your return on investment for sure, right? So your cap rate is going to be much higher when you're not factoring in taxes as well as the very high price of rent here in Cayman. And I mean, on top of that, just like Toronto has experienced for so many years, you also get to factor in the appreciation over the long term. So you're growing your equity, not paying for that at the end through capital gains, and you're not paying on the rental income. So it's certainly a much more. It's easier to make a positive return on investment on both your cash flow and on your appreciation. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, and there's really, I mean, the other question many people ask or are uncertain of is like, well, how do you even get into real estate here? Is it even possible for a Canadian to afford to buy real estate here? And the answer is yes. There's so many different ways you can get involved in real estate or make your first investment that is not like, we have properties from less than $500,000 to, over $50 million. But I mean, the $30 to $50 million properties are not nearly as many as, the lower price properties. And I mean, it really just depends on what your investment objectives are. But if it's to, start to diversify your income, not pay taxes on income and capital gains. And, you can start small. You can start by buying land. I mean, we're a very small island. There's only so much land. You can buy, a piece of land for $150,000, keep it, and then sell it in a couple of years. And you're going to see appreciation of, 20, 30+%. Wow. Or you could make an investment in a pre-construction project where, they're asking for, say, 5% reservation and then the balance of a 10% deposit. And depending on the price point, usually the less expensive ones, it's only a 10 to 20% deposit for the time. And it's usually spaced out, like anywhere, it's a 3 to 4 years.
One question about your pre-construction condo or pre-construction market. Is their deposit protected if they?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know in other markets, your deposit necessarily isn't protected, but that's good to know in Cayman, your deposit is actually protected if you put it down for pre-construction.
Let me put an asterisk with that. like anything, I would never in Canada or here ever recommend to a buyer to not use a lawyer to review a sales contract. And any good lawyer will point out that, wait, that money that's not being held in trust, it's not being guaranteed, and we would not recommend you moving forward. So yes, your money is going to be protected if you are, using a legitimate developer and a lawyer who's reviewing the sales contract. And always use an agent when looking at pre-construction. Same as in Canada, they know a lot more, and they can usually negotiate more terms or better terms on that new build too.
No, continue. Go ahead.
The one unique thing about our pre-construction market is, again, with a lawyer, make sure you have an assignment clause in there and what the terms are, but you can assign before occupancy. And you can also, which is different than most of North America, that you can assign and that gets listed on MLS. So you get the marketing behind it. And then you can flip it before it's even like built, and make, depending on what it is, like say you're buying a $500,000 condo, and in the next 3 years it might increase by 10-15%, and you sell it at somewhere in between that, so that you're making a profit, as well as like someone else who buys it and has to close on it still nets out at a favorable appreciation as well. But really, that's one way many people start in the real estate investment game here, is by buying pre-construction. Or you can get into, like, depending on whether it's like you're investing in short-term, like Airbnb type vacation rentals, or you're investing in more of the longer term, annual, like 1-year annual contracts. There's price points from like all over the place. But I mean, to give you an idea, you can't even get a 1-bedroom anywhere in Cayman, let alone Central Cayman, for less than about $2,000. And that a CI, which works out to almost be $3,000 a month Canadian. And that's just like your most basic 1-bedroom you could find. So, I mean, and that type of property, say the one that like that type of price point, you're probably buying that at around, I don't know, $500,000 Canadian. So, I mean, and the newer ones, they're getting, $2,500 for a 1-bedroom CI. So you're like looking upwards of almost $4,000 a month Canadian. So there's a lot of I mean, there's a good ROI there on your even on your annual leases versus the Airbnbs. Price points for Airbnbs, again, there's something for everyone. So that's right. Like Cayman doesn't really have many hotels. We have like 4 or 5 major hotels, and after that, it's all condos. And so it really just depends on the location. 7 Mile Beach is like world famous, and it's, but even there, you're going to get older condos that, you might be able to get in high season for $600 or $800 US a night. Well, the, like, say Kimpton or Ritz is going for, $1,500 to $2,000 US a night. And so, I mean, there's kind of that price point for everyone. Off market, and off season, really is around May to November, and in lower season for some of the more seasonal properties, you can get it for, a couple $100 US a night. So, right. I mean, it's really the thing about Cayman is it really can appeal to anyone as a visitor or an investor, and they enjoy the perks of having their investment in a tax neutral island.
And so talk to me a little bit about mortgages. Is it hard or easy to get mortgages there? If I'm a Canadian and I want to invest, but I don't have all cash to put down on a place?
Yeah, it's actually, so yes and no is going to be my answer in terms of ease. There are no mortgage brokers in Cayman, unfortunately. So you are working directly with the lenders. The nice thing is we have 5 major banks here, and 3 of which are Canadian. So we have RBC, Scotia, and it's First Caribbean CIBC. Now, unfortunately, they don't really talk to each other, so you still have to go through the process. But it's always easier when you're Canadian buying here and working with a Canadian bank, and especially depending on the price point, if you're working with private banking, which would be for most banks here about $1 million loan US and up. And so the process is very similar to Canada in terms of the documents you need to produce, like your debt to equity ratio, all of that. It's just, it will take a bit longer because you're going directly at the bank and they need to do a bit more research. There's a lot of due diligence, which like compliance because of our laundering policies and such. Mm-hmm. And just, we do move at a slower island pace. Sometimes that's an excuse. Sometimes it's a reality. It just depends. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's very similar to Canada. You could get, depending on your criteria, up to a 65% financed property here. Right. It just depends on the individual. And it does see our interest rates are slightly higher than they are in Canada. So it really depends on whether you want to take out, say, a line of equity out of something you already have in Canada, right, and it appears as like cash here because you're bringing it here, which gives you more strength and negotiating power too. But I mean, really, it's very similar. The process is very similar, and you're protected here through 3 Canadian regulated banks, and then there's the Cayman National Bank and Bank of Butterfield. So, we have hundreds of other banks that are on island, being one of the global financial centers. But those would be the 5 major banks to be dealing with for a mortgage.
Interesting. And I'm assuming it's fairly easy to sell a property there. It's not that much different than it would be here in Canada.
No, the buying and selling process would be quite similar to that in Canada. I say that, but then I have a whole list of things that if you're buying and selling, and this is your first time in Cayman, here is what to expect, because I will say very similar, but there are differences. And a lot of it just has to do with the island time and pace, like island pace of things. And, we are not a 24/7, real estate market right now. Right. People tend to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, nights and weekends. Some of the newer or, agents that come from some of the bigger markets, that's where we play. But I mean, a lot of agents, it's 9 to 5. So things do have a slower pace, but in terms of listing or buying, it's the same process. We have an MLS, so like a central MLS system. So all the major brokerages feed into that. And, you can go on, you can search, and I'll give you the real estate agent's name. And listing would be very much the same way in terms of the process.
So just a couple of questions based on my experience buying in Barbados, for example.
Yeah.
So when you set a date to close a property, first of all, can you close a property in 30 days or is that too soon? Do you need to make sure that your closing date is longer than 60 or 90 or 120 days?
If you're paying with cash, you can close within a couple of weeks. I mean, because it's really just a matter of wiring the money down and working with the lawyers to release any liens, if there are any, on the property that's being bought, and then the process that the lawyer and the banks work with. But I mean, I've seen properties close in a 2 to 3 week period if it's a cash purchase. If you're requiring financing and you're not going through private banking, so you're not getting the same attention, it's really good to look at like a 60-day to 90-day close, just to be careful. And yeah, there's not closing dates like closing dates in, say, North America. It's kind of like
my next question.
That
was my next question. Do they close on time?
Yeah, it's the goal we're trying to hit. But it's I don't know. I have never looked at what the percentages of times that my closings have actually happened based on the date that's in the contract, and it does state on or before. So then you're like, as you're getting closer, you're filling in extensions for that on or before date to be extended out, say 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it may be. So yeah, I mean, I have no clue how Canada would ever get away with this because there's so many things involved in a transaction. I guess because it's a smaller country, there's not that many other people involved. So you're not, I guess, I guess you're not inconveniencing as many people or taking the risk of inconveniencing as many people. But yeah, it is it's kind of the goal and a moving target. So that is one thing that I'm glad you asked, because that's where a lot of patience needs to be had. And
that's my experience from Barbados, in that the closing date doesn't mean much, which as a Canadian realtor is shocking to me, because I would just think a closing date is a line in the sand. That's it. And so it's shocking to me that things just don't close on time, and that's normal. I'm like, what?
Also irrevocables. So, when you put an offer, like you present an offer, there's usually, I don't know, maybe you might get 12 hours in Canada. I don't know. In Toronto right now, one day would be way too much, but usually you're looking at like a 4 to 8 hour window, maybe less. Here, their expectation is about 3 to 5 days.
Okay. Well, time zones, people going abroad. I get that part. Okay. But 1 second, what about electronic signatures? Do you guys do electronic signatures there?
We do. Yes. And, so we do electronic signatures. It is legally acknowledged. When I say that, though, that does not mean every agent uses it. So that can be very frustrating, because I just happened to, when I got into real estate, it was right at kind of the time of electronic signatures. I think I've maybe did one deal where it was like I filled it all in and brought it over and had people sign it, and then faxed it, scanned it, whatever. Yeah. And so that is still done here by some people. No, but I mean, it's so easy to teach people how to use electronic signature. It's more just the agent adopting that process. So that can be a bit frustrating too, because that is where why they need 3 to 5 days, because otherwise time zone, sure. But otherwise, I mean, electronic signature, I mean, you're not waiting on a fax or a courier or anything like that.
Right. Absolutely. Anything else you think the listeners should know before we close off?
Yeah. So I think one of the key things that I like to highlight about Cayman, and I'm actually working on a Why Invest in Cayman campaign, is that, when people come to me and say, so what makes Cayman different from, say, any of the other Caribbean islands, anything from Jamaica to the Virgin Islands to Barbados to Antigua, whatever, Turks and Caicos, Bahamas. It's almost like selling a product. And I mean, I like to say always, you get what you pay for. And there's definitely even though it's a low barrier to entry here in Cayman, it's even a lower barrier to entry probably in some of the other islands. But what I can say is, when people are looking to make an investment, there's quite a few criteria that they're looking at. And I mean, I do believe with the criteria is usually economic stability, the crime rate, health and safety, crime and corruption, and all those types of criteria. And I mean, when people are looking to invest as well, are they looking to invest just to have a property here, or are they looking to possibly relocate here one day? So all those things do play a part. And what I can say is, when you're looking at Cayman next to most islands, it kind of has the gold star. First of all, it's tax neutral. Second, proximity. It's not even an hour's flight to Miami, where then you can, which is a major airport. And we also have many daily flights to many different US and Canadian cities, as well as to the UK.
Right.
And then, we have our infrastructure is state of the art. Our healthcare, we have 3 major hospitals here, and we really are investing in healthcare to provide options to those all over the world that either there's certain, I guess, procedures that might not be approved in other countries that are here, or the waiting list is very long in other countries where you're not paying for healthcare. We kind of call it it's basically medical tourism.
Right.
It's a big thing here, along with like health and wellness and all that. And the school systems are, again, top notch, world class. We have both the American and the UK systems, depending on which the person prefers or where they're living on the island. And so there's all those things. You can drink the water right from the tap. You don't have to. We're the culinary capital of the Caribbean. So, you're looking at amazing restaurants to eat at. And the safety, we're one of the safest places to both travel to and live in globally. So, I mean, you're not worried about like walking at night. I mean, it's about the same as, I don't know Toronto now, but, like there's certain areas where in Canada, you wouldn't even think about walking at 1:00 in the morning.
Right.
Other places where you wouldn't even think about walking at 3:00 in the afternoon. I mean, we don't really have those here. But it's a super safe country. And it's just, what made me fall in love was when you land there, you don't, you walk off the plane right into like the sunshine, down the ramp. And it's just like, it's got a smell and it feels that you just can't even explain it. But I fell in love like the minute I walked off the plane the first time in like 2009.
That's great. Okay, so Kerstin, how do people reach out to you if they'd like to find out some more information about buying real estate in the Caymans?
Thanks, Stiebel. Best thing to do is I use the tag Cayman Real Estate Dreams for most of my social profiles, email, websites, and all that. So because it's long distance to call Cayman, I wouldn't suggest calling me unless you have WhatsApp. But you can find me at Cayman Real Estate Dreams on Instagram or Facebook, and there you'll be redirected to any of like my website, my email, my phone, all that. So at Cayman Real Estate Dreams is the best way to contact me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And thanks everyone for listening to another episode of the Morrison Report podcast. Thanks again.
Thanks, Stiebel. Thanks for having me on the show. It was great.